Hi everybody. I posted a video a little while ago about some research indicating that even if folks have not been very physically active for a prolonged period of time, and of course a lot of folks suffering from complex chronic illness oftentimes will fall into that boat, but sometimes folks who are not suffering from complex chronic illness also fall into that boat. And so this literature was basically saying that folks who have been inactive for a prolonged period of time, if they then start becoming active again, it will help to wake up dormant stem cells and basically allow more body tissue repair, more muscle growth, that type of thing. So in other words, the take-home message was, if you've been sedentary for a while for one reason or another, and you're able to not be sedentary, it's probably a good idea to not be sedentary because you will be healthier and be able to regain fitness and will basically, I think, further subtext or further extrapolations from that, you will live longer and have a longer health span. The other thing in this video was that folks who, the other thing I mentioned in the video is that there's research showing that individuals who stay physically active throughout their lives, they will retain muscle mass in their later years of life, that it's not basically a guaranteed given that we're going to lose muscle mass, gain, have it basically be replaced by fat over the course of time. We can really stay healthy into our later decades of life. So with that preamble out of the way, there was a question that was posted on that video, and the question goes like this. I used to jog about every day, but it's been very hot lately, that I've taken to instead doing yard work at dusk or later. Pushing around a lawnmower or hoisting a weed whacker moves those major muscles, but I'm wondering if this is enough or should I add some treadmill to this new regimen? I'm usually spending about 1 hour or 2 working on said lawn. I also lift free weights, but not much, just 20 reps with 4-pound weights and 20 reps with 5-pound weights. Again, you're sharing good news about the muscle mass thing in the video is much appreciated, and then I'd love to hear whatever biochemical secrets the doctor whose work I was citing came up with. So thank you for the question. As per usual, I'm not able to give any medical advice over social media. This is for informational purposes only. If you need medical advice, please talk to your healthcare provider to get that advice. So when it comes to exercise regimens, I mean, on the one hand, doing anything is definitely better than not doing anything. But at the same time, I think there is an optimal amount of physical activity for folks to be getting. So a couple of thoughts. One is that there's no one-size-fits-all protocol for everyone. The best protocol is going to be dependent on how much time do you have to put into your regimen. And if you're trying to, cram a more elaborate regimen into a schedule that just doesn't allow for it, the likelihood of sticking with that is going to be low. And then if you don't stick with it, then it's probably not going to be that beneficial in the long run. If I'm, diligently following a really robust exercise regimen for 6 months, but then I give up after that, and it's like a few years before I pick it up again, probably better to do more of a moderate regimen for the entire, 3.5 years in this scenario than, hitting it hard for 6 months and then being sedentary for 3 years. So making sure that it's sustainable, I think, is important. Obviously, choosing a protocol that's within one's, reasonable physical abilities. I think it's, on the one hand, good to push ourselves, but we have to know when to push ourselves. And unfortunately, a lot of modern day factors like, people sitting at desk jobs, or there's issues, notable issues in my opinion, with modern day footwear and how that can throw off our foot biomechanics and maybe lead to other biomechanical issues. Various factors that I think unfortunately have kind of hamstrung us to some extent, in that okay, I'm 40, I'm ready to start an exercise regimen, start things up, and it's like, now my knees are bothering me, my hips are bothering me, things like that. And I think that there are underlying factors that might unfortunately kind of sabotage some of these desires to be as healthy as possible, and I guess fit as possible or within reason. So I think that there are certain things that have to be taken into account. And so anyways, with that kind of preamble out of the way, I find that with my patients, speaking from my own experience as well, I think that things to consider emphasizing are things that are going to help to build up muscle mass. Cardio is wonderful, there's, to my understanding, quite a bit of research indicating that doing what they call zone 2 cardio, which to my understanding is where you can do the activity, but it's challenging to hold a conversation during that activity, aiming to do, I believe the research literature, and largely basing this on the work, podcasts and the work of Dr. Andrew Huberman. He has this wonderful podcast called the Huberman Labs podcast, highly recommended. Everything that he talks about is heavily research-based. So he's a really great resource, I think, for clinicians like myself and lay people alike. But looking at the literature that he's presented, I believe it's something like around 150 or 200 minutes of zone 2 cardio per week is kind of ideal. And so again, doing that activity where it would be difficult to have a conversation, like to have a conversation and not be like, taking regular breaths during that conversation, or taking breaths that would be interfering with the normal ebb and flow of that conversation. So, in terms of, if I was doing, fairly rigorous yard work, and I was pushing myself to the point where it was, challenging to have a conversation, then that would be like, wow, a lot of zone 2 cardio, wonderful. So I think cardio is important. It is clinically, that seems to be the case, and a lot of research seems to indicate that as well. But I think that trying to optimize muscle mass is also important. Now, whenever I say this to patients, I always clarify, like, I'm not talking about becoming a bodybuilder. I'm not talking about getting big and bulky. If that's somebody's, on their wish list, wonderful. But you don't have to have like massive looking muscles in order to have health benefits for having more muscle mass. There's plenty of folks out there, like some of the people that I follow on social media or that I know personally, like you look at them and you say, oh, like they don't look, super, their muscles aren't like big and jacked or things like that, but yet they're really, really strong. They're able to do, muscle ups and lots of pull-ups and, different types of squats and single-legged squats, pistol squats as they're called, and whatnot, like all these crazy things. Like, you're so strong, you have so much muscle mass, and yet you don't look like this, hugely, massively fit athletic person necessarily. Like, they look like they're in good shape, but can't really tell just by looking at them that they're, actually really, really muscular or very, very strong. And so, in my opinion, and what I generally recommend to my patients is that if they're able to, either working with a sports physiotherapist who's just familiar with, very familiar with muscle or strength building regimens, or maybe working with a really good personal trainer, or it could be somebody else, could be a good occupational therapist, chiropractor. Like, different folks have different, it's really more about their knowledge base as opposed to what the letters are behind their name. But working with someone who can help you to develop a good exercise regimen, and that there are certain checks and balances along the way to see, are you actually gaining strength? I have patients who come in and they say, I'm doing like cardio this number of days a week, and I'm lifting weights, I'm doing that, and like, I've been doing this regimen for years, and yet, like, why am I gaining weight, or like, why am I putting on more body fat, or why don't I have more energy, or this or that? I'll ask them, like, well, like, when's the last time your regimen changed? You're like, well, I've been doing the same thing for 3 or 4 years. Like, well, first of all, we need to keep our muscles and our the various muscles in our bodies on their toes. If we do the same thing over and over again, our bodies adapt, and then we're going to start getting diminishing returns on that. So we have to kind of keep it fresh. But then also, I think having those checks and balances of, like, can I actually do more push-ups now than I could 6 months ago? Can I do more pull-ups? Can I actually do a pull-up in the first place? And if I'm lifting weights, can I lift, do this exercise with 10 pounds before for say 10 reps? Well, now I can do 15 pounds. Now I can do 20 pounds. So kind of having those checks and balances, I think, is something that's important, because then we can actually see that we're making some progress. And again, we don't have to keep, lifting more and more weight until, like, oh, now I can deadlift 600 pounds or something like that. I mean, that's amazing for folks that can do that. I certainly can't do that. It would be lovely to be able to do that, but not feasible for me at this point, or at this stage of my physical development. But I think that having those, if it's like, oh, I'm, my biceps are, at a size that I'm happy with, well, maybe there are some other more like, body weight type exercises or certain other types of movements that could be done to kind of challenge the body in a different way. We can always be building more strength in different ways, whether it's using body weight exercises, whether it's doing compound exercises, whether it's lifting weights, whether it's saying, okay, I've been doing more strength training with, say, like higher weight, lower reps. Now I'm going to build up. Now I'm going to do some endurance training with higher reps, lower weight. Like, there's just all these different ways that we can keep our bodies on their toes. So I think working with someone to kind of have those checks and balances is an asset. But if a person's already familiar with, I know how to do these exercises and I feel comfortable with them, I'm, not getting injured, that type of thing, of course, folks can be their own personal trainer, if you will, put together their own regimens, and that's certainly, what I do, and I know a number of folks out there do as well. Always great to pick the brain of a trainer or a, sports physiotherapist or whatnot, but certainly, of course, not mandatory. Make our own decisions for what we want to do. But again, just being mindful to not get injured and not do things that are outside of our knowledge base and kind of safety zone. So I hope that information was of use to the person who asked the question. Thank you for the question. If anybody has any questions or comments on this topic or anything else, just post in the comment section below, and I will do my best to answer as soon as I can.